The night Brigadier-General Adeze Ose Nwosu walked into that grocery store in Kanata, she wasn't wearing her uniform. That detail matters. It matters more than most people want to admit. She was wearing a grey wool coat, dark jeans, and a pair of worn running shoes she'd kept since her second tour. Her hair was out, natural, full, the kind that fills a room. She had a basket in one hand and a short list in the other. Almond milk, sourdough bread, the specific brand of black tea her mother had requested after flying in from Lagos for the holidays. Simple things, human things, the kind of errand that is supposed to be invisible. It was a Thursday evening in late November. The store was quiet. The overhead lights were slightly too bright, the way they always are in grocery stores at 8 p.m. That particular fluorescent honesty that shows everything. She moved through the aisles unhurried. She'd spent 26 years learning to move with precision, with purpose, but also with patience. Tonight she was just tired. She'd come straight from a 4-hour briefing at CFB Ottawa. There was a knot behind her left shoulder she couldn't shake. All she wanted was the tea. She was reaching for it on the top shelf, the Murchie's Orange Pico, third from the left, when the store manager appeared beside her. His name, as she would later find out, was Kevin Sprague, mid-40s, assistant manager on a Thursday shift. The kind of man who wore a lanyard like it was a badge of honor. He had the look of someone who had made a decision before he arrived, the way his chin was already set, the way his shoulders were already squared. "Excuse me," he said, not as a question, as an opening move. She looked at him. "Yes? Are you finding everything okay?" The words were polite. The tone was not. "I am, thank you." She put the tea in her basket. He didn't move. "Do you have a loyalty card with us?" "I don't know." "Okay." Still not moving. Are you from the area?" She studied him then. The question wasn't about the neighborhood. She'd lived in Kanata for 11 years. She knew exactly what the question was about. "I am," she said simply, and she turned to walk toward the bread. He followed her. Not quickly, not aggressively. He was too careful for that, but he followed. Down the bread aisle, past the dairy section, maintaining a distance of about 6 feet, with the studied casualness of a man who had rehearsed this in his mind many times, but never out loud. She stopped at the sourdough. She could feel him watching from the end of the aisle. She took a breath. She thought about her daughter, who was at home right now, probably burning the rice she'd promised to cook. She thought about her mother, who had flown 14 hours to spend Christmas in Canada and deserved to have her tea. She thought about the briefing this afternoon, about the logistics reports and the command decisions and the 47 personnel files that needed her review by Monday morning. She thought about all of this, and she put the bread in her basket, and she walked toward the checkout. That was when Sprague appeared again, this time with a uniformed security guard. The guard's name, as it was printed on his vest, was T. Prue. He was young, maybe 22, the kind of young where the uniform still looked slightly borrowed, where the authority still sat awkwardly on the shoulders. He had the decency, at least, to look uncomfortable. "Ma'am," Sprague said, and now his voice had shifted. Firmer, official, wrapped in the language of procedure. "We've had some reports of. We've been monitoring some loss prevention concerns this evening, and I need to ask you to come with us to the back office for a moment." She stopped. The checkout line was 5 feet away. There were 3 people in it. 2 of them had turned to look. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's just routine," Sprague said. "We just need to verify a couple of things." "Verify what, exactly?" The guard looked at the floor. "Ma'am, I'd rather discuss this privately." She set her basket down on the nearest shelf, carefully. She did not raise her voice. She had never needed to raise her voice to be heard, and she wasn't about to start now. "Let me make sure I understand you," she said. "I've been in this store for approximately 12 minutes. I have picked up 3 items, all of which are currently in this basket. You have followed me through 2 aisles, and you are now asking me to go to a back office on the basis of what? Monitoring concerns." Sprague straightened. "Ma'am, this is standard procedure when? Standard procedure based on what observation? What specifically did you see me do?" The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. "I think it would be better if we—" "I'm not going to the back office," she said. "I haven't done anything wrong. If you believe I have, you're welcome to call the police. Otherwise, I'd like to pay for my groceries." And that was the moment Sprague made the mistake that would define the next 6 months of his professional life. He nodded to T. Prue. The guard stepped forward and put a hand on her arm. She looked at that hand. She looked at it with the same expression she used when a junior officer made an error in a command briefing. Not fury, not panic, just a very still, very clear recognition of what had just occurred. "Remove your hand," she said. Prue did, immediately. But the damage, as they say, was done. Sprague had already picked up his radio and was calling for the on-duty supervisor. 3 more shoppers had turned. A woman near the dairy case had her phone out. An elderly man by the magazine rack had stopped pretending to read. The supervisor arrived. A younger woman named Danny Bouchard, who looked, the moment she assessed the scene, like she understood completely that something had gone very wrong. She looked at Brigadier-General O.C. Nwosu. She looked at Sprague. She looked at the basket sitting calmly on the shelf, with its almond milk and sourdough and orange pekoe tea. "Mr. Sprague," she said carefully, "what exactly is the situation?" "Loss prevention protocol," he said, with slightly less confidence than he'd had 30 seconds ago. "Based on what?" He hesitated. Bouchard looked at the Brigadier-General. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry for—" "Don't apologize yet," O.C. Nwosu said. "I'd like to speak with whoever is above Mr. Sprague in this organization, tonight if possible. And I'd like to know the name of the regional manager." Bouchard blinked. "Of course. Could I ask your name?" There was a pause. A particular kind of pause. The kind that comes before a sentence that rearranges things. "Brigadier-General Adeze O.C. Nwosu," she said. "Canadian Armed Forces. I'm the Deputy Commander of 2 Canadian Division. I live 7 minutes from this store. I have been a customer here for 9 years. The sound that followed was not a sound exactly. It was more of an absence, the specific silence of a room recalibrating itself. Sprague opened his mouth, closed it. Prue had taken a small but very definite step backward. Bouchard, to her credit, held herself together. "Brigadier-General, please, let me get you the regional manager's direct line right now. And your groceries, please let me." "I'll pay for my groceries," O.C. Nwosu said, picking up her basket, like I was about to do 15 minutes ago. She walked to the checkout. She paid. She folded her receipt and put it in her coat pocket. She said a brief, polite thank you to the young cashier who had watched the entire exchange and was visibly unsure what facial expression was appropriate. Then she walked out into the November dark, got into her car and sat for a moment. Outside through the plate glass windows, she could see Sprague and Bouchard in heated conversation. She could see Prue standing slightly apart, his arms at his sides, the posture of a man beginning to understand the shape of what he'd participated in. She pulled out her phone. She called her mother. "Did you find the tea?" her mother asked. "I found it," she said. "Good. The rice is fine, by the way. Tell your daughter I saved it." She laughed. And then she hung up and called her legal officer. What followed was not quick, because these things are never quick. It was not simple, because these things are never simple. But it was thorough. The regional manager of the grocery chain received a formal call the following morning. He later said, never received a call quite like it. O.C. Nwosu did not shout. She did not threaten. She laid out the facts in the order they occurred, the way she would brief any command situation, with precision and without editorializing. She told him what had happened, what had been said, what had been done, and what she expected by way of response. She gave him 72 hours. The surveillance footage from the store confirmed everything. All 12 minutes of it, the movement through aisles, the selection of items, the basket kept visible at all times, and then, clearly and undeniably, the act of Sprague following her and Prue, placing a hand on her arm after she had explicitly said she had not consented to go anywhere. The footage was not flattering to anyone who had made a decision that evening. Kevin Sprague was placed on administrative leave within the week, pending a full internal review. The chain's Human Resources Department launched what they described publicly as a comprehensive investigation into store, conduct, and staff training protocols. Privately, those familiar with the case understood the investigation had a very clear beginning, middle, and end, and that the end had already been decided by the footage. Prue, to his credit, submitted a full written account that corroborated O.C. Nwosu's version of events exactly. He was younger, and perhaps he understood, in the way that young people sometimes do when they see the actual shape of something, that there is a difference between following an order and being complicit in what that order produces. The chain issued a public apology. It was written carefully, in the language of accountability, without quite touching the language of admission, which is the particular grammar of corporate remorse. But it named the incident directly. It referenced the need for systemic change in how staff are trained to interact with customers. It did not name Ozi Nwosu by rank, because she had not given permission for that. It used the phrase, "a valued member of our community," and left the rest to the imagination of anyone who read it and understood the context. The regional manager called her back personally before the 72 hours were up. He did not offer her free groceries. He seemed to understand, somehow, that this was not a situation where a gift card would help. He asked what she needed from the organization. She told him plainly, mandatory unconscious bias training across all Ontario locations, a revised loss prevention protocol with specific documented thresholds required before any customer approach, and a process by which any employee who felt pressured into inappropriate customer contact could report that pressure without fear of retaliation, because she had not missed the way tea. Prue had looked at the floor. The chain agreed to all three within 60 days. Danny Bouchard was promoted to store manager the following spring. This is not unconnected to the fact that when it mattered, she was the only person in that building who had immediately understood what was happening and tried to course correct. Osi Nwosu did not speak publicly about the incident herself. She did not post about it. She did not give interviews. She had not spent 26 years in the Canadian Armed Forces, developing a sense of discipline only to discard it for the short satisfaction of a public statement. What she wanted was not attention. What she wanted was change. And she had learned, in 26 years, that those two things are not always the same. But others spoke. Bouchard spoke, eventually, when she was asked by the chain's training department to help design the new protocol. Prue spoke, in the way that young people sometimes speak when they are trying to put something right. The woman near the dairy case, who had taken out her phone, she posted what she had seen without naming names, and the post was shared 4,000 times before the week was out. Most of the comments saying some version of the same thing, that this kind of story was not surprising, and that the surprise was only in how it ended. Because the thing that stays with you, if you sit with this story long enough, is not the resolution. The resolution is almost beside the point. The thing that stays with you is the 12 minutes before it. 12 minutes in which a person who had spent 26 years serving this country walked through a grocery store selecting 3 items, and someone looked at her, at the grey coat, at the natural hair, at the running shoes she'd kept since her second tour, and made a decision, not based on what she had, based on what she looked like, based on the particular calculus of who is supposed to belong in a quiet Kanata grocery store on a Thursday night, and who is supposed to be watched. She had the rank to push back. She had the training, the language, the position, and the legal resources to make it cost something. And it did cost something. That's important. It's worth saying clearly, what she was able to do, she was able to do in part because of who she is in rooms where names and titles open doors. Not every person followed through an aisle has those tools. Not every person touched on the arm by a security guard has a legal officer to call. Not every person can lay out the facts of an incident with the precision of a military briefing and be heard in 72 hours. And that is the question this story leaves on the table. Not, did she get justice? She did, as much as justice looks like policy changes and administrative reviews and a quiet apology from a regional manager who now understands something he did not understand before. But what about the people who go through the same 12 minutes and walk out of the store into the November dark with nothing but the weight of it? What about the ones without the rank, without the coat that looks like the right kind of coat, without the 26 years of service that can be named in a sentence that stops a room? They're in the same aisle, they're picking up the same tea, and nobody calls anyone. That's not an indictment of any one store, or any one manager, or any one young security guard who looked at the floor. It's a question about what we've decided to treat as routine, about who bears the cost of being watched in their own neighborhood, in their own city, in the country they have, in some cases, literally, spent their life defending. The tea, by the way, was good. Osei Nwosu's mother said so. She stayed through Christmas, through New Year's, through the hard cold weeks of January when Ottawa remembers what winter actually means. She drank her tea every morning, and she watched the snow from the window, and she told her daughter stories about home, about Lagos, about the way light looks different there. She did not know about any of this. Osei Nwosu did not tell her. Some things you carry quietly, because the people who love you have already carried enough. But on the last night before her mother flew back, they sat at the kitchen table with their cups and the January dark outside, and her mother said, the way mothers sometimes say things that go straight to the center, "You look tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix." "I know," Nwosu said. "Is it work?" She thought about how to answer that. She thought about Sprague and his lanyard and the decision he had made before he arrived. She thought about the 12 minutes. She thought about the policy changes that were now being written into a training manual somewhere, and whether they would actually hold, and for how long, and for whom. "Something happened," she said. "It worked out." Her mother looked at her for a long moment, the way mothers do when they know there is more and they are deciding whether to ask for it. "Good," she said finally, and she put her hand over her daughter's hand. "Then sleep." Nwosu did not sleep easily that night, but in the morning she made 2 cups of tea and brought one to her mother, and they sat together in the thin winter light, and for a little while the world was very quiet and very small, and contained almost entirely the people she loved. That is how this story ends. Not in a courtroom, not in a headline, in a kitchen, in January, with tea. But the question it asks does not end there. It follows you out into whatever Thursday evening you happen to be having, into whatever grocery store, into whatever aisle where someone is reaching for something on a shelf and someone else is deciding whether they belong there. If this story made you feel something, anger, recognition, relief, or that particular weight that comes when you realize a story is not just a story, sit with it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And ask yourself honestly, in that store, in that moment, which person would you have been?